Hi, I'm Sarah Da Silva, and today we're going to talk about DARVO and the cycle of abuse and how this is connected with confrontation. So, confrontation is like really important in the healing process when you've gone through abuse, especially over a very long period of time. You've experienced abuse with a person. Say it's a parent, like you've literally had this parent abusing you your entire life and you want to now confront them about what they've done, but then they suddenly deny it, and they like you actually went into this confrontation with really good intentions, believing that everything was going to be quite clear and quite, kind and loving, and then it got blown back in your face, basically. And then you're questioning why when I actually went to them with the truth of the reality and my actual real feelings, did it all get thrown back in my face? And that's because sometimes we go into confrontation with the expectation that it's going to give us something, where confrontation actually is a part of the end part of the healing process. And it shouldn't have any expectations or things that we need from it. The only thing that we should get from confrontation is healing, and it should be a last process where we're kind of just clearing the air. But we see confrontation before we start to heal as something that's going to actually be the instigator of the healing. And unfortunately, sometimes we'll go to the abuser and confront them about the abuse. And this could be, a narcissist. This could be someone we've worked with for years and years. This could be a parent. This could be a partner. And they may have already had a process or a cycle that they were taking you through that you didn't realize that they were doing, which was keeping you in the same position for them under their purpose of basically continuing to manipulate and gaslight you. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. In order to do that, I'm going to define a few key terms, and then we're going to go into what you can do. And then where should basically confrontation come from? So in the process of abuse, we might be experiencing this from anyone in our life. It's usually someone who we have consistent contact with. So it's not necessarily someone we just see once, because, someone can easily throw abuse at us once and we can easily walk away and be like, well, I'm not going back near that person. But when we're talking about consistent abuse, we're talking about when someone has put on a front that made them feel charming or easy to get along with, that made them seem trustworthy, someone you could value, or someone who you could put your a lot of value in what they say, like someone who, is an authoritative figure in your life. So this could be a person who is a parent, a sibling, a teacher, a boss, whatever it may be. But we can also eventually put other people in our lives in that position, for example, a partner or a child. So like we're talking with the child, that comes in in a whole other facet. But it basically, when we're talking about abuse, we're talking about behavior that we don't want to accept, but we do accept anyway, and we're not sure why. So basically, that's because the person has put themselves in a position that was trustworthy, that was in a way, an authoritative position, where we're kind of like not sure, should I stand up for myself in front of this person, or should I kind of back off and maybe be a little bit concerned about the behavior that they're displaying? Because in a normal situation, we'd probably just walk away, right, from this person. If they started to display abusive behavior, generally we'll walk away. But in a position where we're taking repeated abuse, it's usually a position where we can't walk away. So I'm talking a parent, a boss, etc., or a friend or a partner, whatever it may be. We're in a position where we're getting something from this person, and we're kind of like, if I leave, I'm going to lose something. And that could even just be their love and admiration and validation. Might not be something tangible. So what we are basically encountering in these relationships are a cycle. So the cycle goes around and around and around. And upon face value, it all seems good and nice and fine. But then you find yourself in a situation that you cannot back out of. And that is the cycle of abuse. And the way the cycle of abuse begins is like, obviously, we're not going to be in a situation where we're going to be constantly 24/7 taking abuse. So that's why we get stuck in these trauma bonds. And a trauma bond is a situation where we can't get out of it with this person. We still need them in our lives and we still value them in our lives, even though they may be harming us. So in the cycle of abuse, first up, we experience the Hoover and the honeymoons phase, where everything is just really, really nice. We're being drawn in, we're being charmed, and like everything's kind of really nice. And, you know, we really wouldn't question any of this behavior unless it was kind of like a red flag, like they're being overly nice or they're being too much. We should start questioning that. But a lot of the time, these people are quite good at what they do, and they don't seem like the kind of person that are untrustworthy or someone that you could discredit, you know, as being a good, kind person, especially in society. They like to display themselves as this kind, really well-rounded person that's very nice to everyone. And especially like, you know, case study, we'll throw in a case study here as a perfect example. Joseph Fritzl, who was one of the worst abusers in the world, who locked his daughter in a basement for, you know, upwards of 18 years or something like that, was actually a well-known member of his community, and people respected him. He was well respected. But when it came to behind closed doors and he didn't have to put on that mask, that charade all the time, he ended up being quite abusive. So we're looking at that kind of behavior where they're quite charming, they're quite nice, they're quite well respected, but then tensions start to build. We start to notice that tensions are building. They might say or do things that are not in alignment with their character that they've shown you up front at first. And you might feel that they're not quite aligning in terms of what they say about people. They might say, you're so amazing, but then they start to discredit you a little bit. They start to devalue you a little bit. They might start to say bad things about you that make you feel a little bit bad. Then their actions might actually show you that, you know, they want you to feel that way as well. And so you're basically starting to feel a little bit concerned, a little bit confused, maybe like you don't really want to confront them about this. You might be going, okay, well, maybe they're not always like this. Maybe they're just having a bad day. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. And then we experience the next part of the cycle, which is the abuse and the discard. So they'll start abusing you and they'll outright, you know, display behavior that is really not acceptable. Now, depending on what situation you are in, you may have experienced this behavior when you were growing up with a parent or a sibling or your caregiver. You may have experienced it with a teacher or whoever it may be, an authoritative figure in your life. And now you're experiencing it with a boss or a partner, and you might not seem to think that this behavior is that weird. You go, oh, they're just like my parent, you know, I have to kind of navigate this behavior. But if you've never experienced this behavior before, you'll be very taken aback by it. You'll be like, wow, this is really strange. This person is not someone that I really want to spend much time around, because this is, you know, way below the line behavior. So the next part of the cycle is, after the below the line behavior, we take a step back. And sometimes we'll take a step back, but we'll go, I really don't like this, and we'll run away. But sometimes when you don't have very strong boundaries, you won't take a step back, and the abuser will discard you instead. They'll say, you know, I hate you and you're so crap. And you know what? I didn't want you anyway. So get lost, and you know what, you're fired, or whatever it may be. They will throw you away. They will discard you, or they'll make you feel like you're discarded and you should get away from the situation. Either or, you're going to be out of there. So that's the first 3 phases of the cycle are very distinct. Everything's nice. The honeymoon phase is happening. Everything's kind of like all love bomby and quite happy and charming. Then the tension starts to build. You'll notice that the devaluation starts to kick in. You're like, what's going on here? I don't quite know what's happening. They're being quite abusive, and I'm either going to walk away, which is the next step, or they're going to discard me. They're going to throw me away. So the next phase of the cycle, if we're not quite well established with our boundaries, we might come into the next phase of the cycle and not realize it's happening. But if we're pretty strong in our boundaries, we're going to be like, I'm not going back near that person. And the next phase of the cycle starts to happen and we'll walk away. But if we're not strong in our boundaries, or if we don't have a very strong sense of self-identity, we have a strong inner critic, and we have experienced this abuse in the past, we might realize that this person's going to come back and they're going to apologize. They're going to say things like, I didn't know what I was thinking. I'm really sorry. Will you please forgive me? Can we just let it go? Et cetera, et cetera. And, to someone who's experienced this abuse and they've experienced it in the past and they're like, well, that person wasn't very nice, hearing an apology and hearing that they're not going to do it again is really, really nice. So you kind of accept that apology, especially if you're in a work situation where it's your boss doing this. You're like, okay, you must have been having a bad day. I get it. I'm going to accept this apology and we'll move on. And they'll start to re-engage the cycle again. So basically that was the Hoover. They wanted to get you back in. So they were hoovering you, drawing you back in. And now they're going to do the love bombing and the honeymoon period again. So it gets into the love bombing phase where you feel like this is almost too good to be true. Everything's nice. They're saying all these nice things about me, even to not other people, for example. But then tensions start to rise again and they start to devalue you. The abuse kicks in and the discard happens. Everybody disbands. You'll either walk away or they'll discard you. And then the Hoover and the honeymoon phase starts again. If you notice that this cycle is repeating over and over again, you are experiencing the cycle of abuse. Now, when this happens over and over again, you start to get affected in a negative way. Your inner critic starts to yell at you, no, you're not good enough. And, you're basically not good enough to have anyone good in your life. And you're lucky enough that this person keeps taking you back and keeps giving you another chance, because in any other situation, if you were this bad, no one would take you back, basically. So you start to tell yourself that you deserve this behavior. You become a bit of a fawner, a bit of a people pleaser, and you start to give more than what this person deserves. You start to tread on eggshells when the tensions start to build, because you don't want things to go wrong. So you start to be more people pleasy. You start to listen to the inner critic even more and try your best to be validated in the eyes of this person, even though you don't realize that what they're doing is actually really detrimental to your emotional well-being, and it's going to break you down even more and more. And you don't realize that this kind of abuse is actually going to induce complex PTSD for you. So every time you're walking on eggshells, you're basically, that's because you've got PTSD from this abuse that's been happening over and over and over again. And when you go into new situations where you meet new people in your life who may not be abusive, you're still going to engage in people-pleasing, walking on eggshell behavior that's going to try and make everybody happy and try and refrain from making people upset, because you think that there's something inherently wrong with you because you've been broken down by somebody else. And that might not just be one person. It might be several people in your life, and it might be people who are the flying monkeys of this abuser. Now, what is a flying monkey? A flying monkey is someone who's also at the behest of this abuser, who wants to make this abuser happy, who literally will do anything to be at the beck and call of this abuser. So we're talking the abuser like the Regina George from Mean Girls, who has her little group of girls who want to make her happy at all times, to the point of making other people unhappy or hurting other people, just so that they can be good enough for the abuser. The abuser loves this. They love having this group of this posse of people who will always be at their beck and call, so that they're basically the center of attention, they're the best. And if anyone tries to confront them, coming back to confrontation, anyone tries to discredit them or use what they have done against them, it's going to be used back against the person who's confronting them. So that's why it's really not a good idea to try and confront these people at all. You should really just pay attention to the behavior that you're experiencing and walk away and start to take note of every time they do that and how frequently this happens, because it's the more frequently it happens, the more likely that this is going to be detrimental to your well-being, and it's more likely that they're doing this systematically as abuse, as an abusive manipulation tactic to get you how they want you to. Now, what is DARVO? D-A-R-V-O. You might have seen this before, but DARVO is basically when you go into the confrontation process and you might be being abused and you react to the abuse, or you might not be in an abusive situation right now, but you're confronting them about the abuse. You will experience DARVO, which is D, deny, A, attack, R, reverse, O, V, victim, and an O, offender. So they're going to deny you. They're going to deny what you've said immediately. They're going to counter attack onto you. They're going to reverse victim and offender. So they're going to put themselves in the victim position, which you were just in, and now make you the offender of what has been happening, of this circumstantial situation. That's why it's never, ever a good idea to confront an abuser, because they're always going to engage in DARVO. They're always going to turn it back onto you, and they're going to make themselves the victim. You're not going to have any power in this situation, because you're going to feel really confused. Like, how did I come to you with a situation, and now you are suddenly the victim of this situation, and now I'm suddenly the one in the wrong? It's very, very sticky and dangerous, a very sticky territory to get into. That's why it's always best, if you're noticing the cycle of abuse is happening, when confrontation or a reaction occurs, DARVO is happening, to always get yourself out of that situation. If you find that you're finding it hard to get out of that situation, say you are living with your parents and you cannot get out of that situation, you're too young to move out, or you are in a situation where you don't have enough money to get out of this situation, you can't find a new job at the moment, don't see that as you being stuck, because that person, the abuser, is going to be using that as a situation to keep you where you are. They're going to be reminding you how stuck you are. They're going to say you can't get out of this situation, which is why you need to start asserting what your goals are for the future to get out of this situation, and then start getting help and support. So there's nothing wrong with, if you're in an abusive relationship, to start using this person to start getting out of the situation. And I'm talking, if they're giving you an allowance, put that money aside, some of that money aside, to get out of that situation as soon as possible. If you're getting money from a parent, or they're holding something over you to make sure that you stay there, let that thing go and go and create that for yourself outside. Because I can guarantee you that if they're saying that they're not going to pay for your college tuition or whatever it is, let that go. There's many ways of getting to where you want to be without having someone else pay for you, that's just one example. If someone's holding a home over your head, there are many ways to get out of that by biding your time and protecting yourself against the abuse until you can get out of that situation as soon as possible. Don't ever believe that you are stuck in this situation. Always find a way to remove yourself safely, but don't let this person know that you're doing that. Don't let this person know that as soon as I can, I'm getting out of here and this is my plan. Keep that all to yourself. Keep that all zip locked, and just find the opportunistic moment to get out of it. When you do remove yourself from the situation and you found support, through therapy. For example, if you came to me as a coach, I help people through these situations to get out of these situations, but I also not just do that, I help them to create a sense of identity outside of this situation, because we have lost who we are. That inner critic has completely shrouded your sense of identity completely, and you've lost who you are. So I help you to gain a sense of identity back again. And when you've healed and found that sense of identity, created goals that are aligned with what you want to do, and actually achieving those goals and realizing that you can do that without that person, you're working on these tools that are going to help you to put up strong boundaries. And that can be practiced easily just by really figuring out, what are my rules about life, and am I going to stick to them or not? And when it comes to those situations, you actually stick to them even when it feels uncomfortable. The next step to that part is dealing with those feelings of feeling uncomfortable. That's why you need that support. Come to a coach like myself or a therapist who can talk you through those emotions that you feel when you're starting to put up boundaries. Even though they feel uncomfortable, eventually it starts to feel even better. A very, very, very final step. If that person asked you, why did you leave? You can tell them. You can say, I didn't like the way you were treating me, and I'm never going to take that again. But confronting them is not about getting any kind of closure from them, because they're always going to deny it. They're always never, ever. That's a kind of half negative. They're never, ever going to validate or acknowledge what you have said to them about what they have done. Because if they're a true narcissist, they cannot believe they'll never believe that they can do any wrong. Like, firstly, and you were just a pawn in whatever they wanted to be using you in. But if they're an abuser and they're truly hurt, they're just going to deny it, because they're in a constant state of being wounded about being wrong and having to take responsibility for the pain that they have caused, that they're going to outright deny that they have harmed you in any way. So trying to find closure by confronting the abuser is only going to step you backwards if the expectation is to get something from it. If you understand that the cycle of abuse goes around that way, and if you confront or react that DARVO is going to happen every single time, then you are going to understand that confrontation itself is only about healing, about telling them, I know what you did to me. I know that the way you treated me was wrong, and I'm never going to take that behavior ever again. And I really don't need to know what you think about it either. That's the most healing part, because that's the last step. Letting them know that you are done with that treatment, and you're never going to let anyone else treat you that way either. I hope that you found value from this video, that in confronting confrontation itself is being the very last step in the healing process of going through the cycle of abuse, that confronting is not the first step. It's not a way to heal, that confronting your abuser is never going to be the answer to finding the answers to anything in the situations that you've been experiencing, and that it was never ever your fault that you actually experienced that in the first place. It was actually their fault. It was all them, and the confrontation is never going to help you to find any justification for it, because there is no justification or excuse for the way that they have treated you ever. So know that you are not alone, and that you can always come here, that you have support. And if you have any questions regarding the cycle of abuse, DARVO, or confrontation itself, please pop the questions below. I am always reading and checking out your questions, and I'm always here for you. And I want you to know that you're never alone here, that I myself have been through this process of going through the cycle of abuse, DARVO, doing the confrontation process. And that's a story that I will share one day. It's a very, very, very powerful story that I will share with you all one day as a part of my process. But I hope these tips have done you well today, and stay tuned for the next video. Thanks for being here. Hit like and subscribe if you like this video. Otherwise, that's okay. I'm sure if you enjoyed this video, more content like this will pop up for you in the near future. Lots of love, everyone.